What's up, everybody? And welcome back in as we have an update on Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Frankie and an indication potentially of what Jodi Hildebrandt's prison sentence may be. And I think a lot of you will be right in line with these reports or this discussion of what may be coming. It's harsher than I was expecting. I think it's warranted based on what we know and what she's pled to and those factual allegations and how horrible they are and the fact that she's definitely seems to be a danger to the community. But we also get a little vindication and appreciation for the system finally working, better late than never, from Jessie, Jodi Hildebrandt's niece, who we know has been dealing with this for a number of years. And she gave an interview on Law and Crime with Jesse Weber. We're going to watch about 10 minutes of that and listen to them discuss what she knows, what she's kind of been privy to in her conversations with people involved in the case, how she feels about it, what her participation will be. So we're going to listen to all that and more. I appreciate you guys for sending me this video and letting me know it's out there. I obviously can't follow everything all the time, but you guys have the best questions as the chat, subscribers, members. I know when a bunch of you are asking about something that so many of you will have similar questions. So that's why we're doing this today, a weekend special. Hopefully you guys enjoy a couple videos dropping on the weekend to just keep you going. There was so much content, so much stuff happening this week. We jumped right back into action after the new year. So hopefully you guys enjoy all the videos. We're trying to stay on top of as many things as we can because if you have questions, I want to answer them, even when something random and new pops up. So hit that like button if you guys are enjoying the content and enjoy this kind of process that we're doing together. And make sure you subscribe if you want to be a part of picking the content in the future, being in the live chats and things like that. So let's get to this interview here between Jesse Weber and Jodi's niece.
What happened to Frankie's children inside of that Ivins, Utah home? Well, Jesse joins us again to discuss the latest developments in this case. Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time. I can't tell you how much I always appreciate you being very open with how you're feeling and what you experienced. And since we've spoken, so much has happened. I'm just going to ask you straight up your reaction to Jodi Hildebrandt pleading guilty.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey on my end of processing and reprocessing everything that's been going on. The day that it happened, I was surprisingly really angry. I didn't expect to feel so much anger kind of come up in that experience. I think part of it was when her lawyer came out and gave just the most ridiculous comment to the press about how Jodi is just she pled guilty because she's just trying to take accountability for her actions, and she just really cares about the kids healing and all of this garbage, just complete trash. That was pretty enraging. Um, I mean, I can't imagine it actually changing anyone's mind or convincing anyone of like it's so obviously a manipulation tactic to save face. But that was pretty enraging. And then slowly throughout the day, like a lot of this weight just like slowly kind of lifted off my shoulders, and a lot of this subconscious fear that somehow she was going to be able to kind of wiggle her way out of any accountability slowly lifted. Yeah, so I was able to speak to the DA a little bit that evening, and he informed me that the likelihood of her getting maximum sentencing is incredibly high. That
The likelihood of her getting the maximum sentence is incredibly high, which I believe was 15 years per the 4 counts that she pled to, running consecutively, not concurrently. So that's 60 years in prison.
she's most likely going to be getting the 60 years.
Wow.
She talked to the DA, and the DA said Jodi Hildebrandt is most likely going to be getting the 60 years, which to me is wild. And with somebody with her lack of a criminal history, seems pretty wild. And I would say that I think the national attention and outrage at this to not just be a slap on the wrist, to not just be something that lets her go out and hurt more people and hurt more kids potentially in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or whatever it may be, is pretty wild. I can't remember what I said, I guess, but I was thinking maybe somewhere around 5 years per or even less than that, maybe somewhere in the 10 to 20 years total for all 4 counts. Because again, I think 20 years is a pretty long time for somebody that's her age, but 60 years is basically a life sentence for her. What do you think about that? Do you agree or disagree with the 60 years? Do you think it's enough, not enough? too harsh, not harsh enough. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about this. And Jesse here seems very confident about this conversation with the DA. So that's pretty wild to me. Now, it's not up to the DA because there's going to be a pre-sentence investigation. They're going to talk about that a little bit here, and we'll discuss it together as well. But that's the big bombshell. Most likely sentence for Jodi Hildebrandt, according to the DA via Jesse, is 60 years.
Oh, that we were wondering that because again, 15 years is the max on each
Yeah.
charge. And again, look, the way that we understand it as well, from Utah law is it really isn't the judge who sets it. It's more like this is what punishment is, and it's up to a board to determine if she'll ever be granted parole. So, I mean, that's our
Yeah.
So that's similar. The judge can absolutely go up or down from whatever that report is from the pre-sentence investigation. But there is a group of people that do this pre-sentence investigation and give their recommendation. And when you plead and the prosecutor doesn't have to agree to it, the defense doesn't necessarily have to agree to it because they've already pled. So at this point, they're at the mercy of the PSI. So how is the PSI going to get to 60 years is interesting to me. I don't know if that's going to become public or if we're going to hear about it in the hearing, but I'd be really interesting to hear how the PSI gets to the max sentence based on her background.
understanding about it.
Yeah, so he also told me that it's about 8 months from now that that board will be put together, and
So maybe a little longer than some of you are thinking. Not that unusual that it'll take 8 months for this pre-sentence investigation to take place for them to come up with whatever their proposal is for a sentence for Jodi Hildebrandt and probably Ruby Frankie.
that's gonna be, like, the first parole hearing will be in as little as 8 months.
Yeah.
And that's what we're gonna be focusing like, what the DA said to be focusing on, like, having a written statement of harm and, showing up to those hearings, and hopefully that this after this first one, that it will be pushed years down the line.
Well, first of all, were you there when she pled guilty, and do you plan to appear at her sentencing?
I was not there. I didn't want to be there, um, or at least I was pretty torn on whether I wanted to be there or not. I won't be there for her sentencing simply because of just the timing of it. I'll be in Europe. Um, I would have liked to be there for the sentencings. I will be there for the parole hearing, most likely. That's I think where a lot of victims like that's the important time for victims to come forward and to convince the board that she doesn't deserve any sort of parole.
I thought it was really interesting when you said that it didn't seem genuine, her reason for pleading guilty. Obviously,
Oh,
from a legal point of view, there's a number of reasons why I think she did it. You had Ruby Frankie agreeing to testify against her. Evidence looks really bad, but
And that's where we start to get into how Ruby Frankie fits into this and trying to compare their sentences. So Ruby Frankie was willing to testify against Jodi Hildebrandt. Ruby Frankie pled first. Whoever the first one is to flip usually gets the better deal. So I would expect her to get less time than Jodi Hildebrandt for that. Additionally, we're going to read a statement here or see a statement read about what Ruby Frankie thinks about Jodi Hildebrandt's culpability in all of this situation.
you don't believe
that
in
right there.
any way, you don't believe in any way she feels bad about what happened.
Not even a little bit. No, it's so wild because something that she would constantly um, accuse me of when I was living with her. So when the abuse started getting really bad, people in my church started noticing that I didn't look well and that something was wrong. And they started talking to the bishop or the pastor, the person in charge of our ward, um, just like their concerns. And the bishop, Bishop Bangader, told Jody these people's names, and then we would go to their home, and she would coach me in the car and tell me exactly what I was going to say, and then she would go in with me, and I'd have to apologize to them for manipulating them into feeling sorry. I believed that that Jesus was working through Jody, and that Jody was saving me, and so it's just darkly ironic that watching her in the pews, like at the sentencing, just like looking so sad, and then telling like her attorney coming out and saying something like that is just like, wow, oh, you're manipulating all that time you were telling me that that's what I was doing was just your projection because that's what you would do and are doing. Like it's like you don't get accused and like convicted of child torture and then suddenly are like, oh, I just really care about these children's healing. Like that's not what happens.
Yeah.
You don't go 15 years of having this be a pattern and then suddenly be like, I just really care about these children. That's not possible.
And I wanted to ask you about that because now that the plea agreements have been entered, these court documents have been filed, and we now
Yeah.
know more details about what happened to these kids. I mean, talking about Jodi Hildebrandt, as I mentioned earlier
Yeah.
on in the show, she either physically forced or coerced a 9-year-old girl, Eve, to jump into a cactus multiple times. These two children were dehydrated. They weren't given food. They were made to work outside in the heat.
Yep.
Did it seem worse what happened to these kids, or just eerily similar to what you went through?
So a lot of it was similar. There were certain specifics that were not. I went on News Nation to give a statement right after the plea, and I didn't know about the cactus, and they had spoken about it right before they brought me on, and it was horrifying to hear about. Not surprising, but horrifying nonetheless. She, again, she's one of the most convincing, powerful humans you will ever meet. And when you are in a state of vulnerability, especially as a child, there's just she can convince you of anything. I mean, I worked out in her garden in the
And these are the
middle of the
types of things
summer.
that I guess we can expect to come out from victim impact statements for the board that makes the decision, for the PSI to discuss with people. And these aggravated facts and all of the people that may be affected that they talk to, that might be how they get to the max.
Like, we didn't live in southern Utah, so it was not as hot, or as dry. But I was working out in her yard all summer, and she used withholding food, withholding water as a way of course. Um, I mean, she'd duct tape me and tied me up, but I was also a teenager. There's a very big difference between being 16 and going through something like this and being a 9-year-old. Like, there's just no way of comparing those two things.
It was horrifying for me. I think it was worse than I even imagined. I mean, talking
Yeah,
about just the injury sustained, what these kids went through, not even the physical trauma, the emotional, mental
the
trauma as well.
emotional.
And
Well,
you've talked about that as well.
yes, the emotional and spiritual abuse. I mean, it took me. I mean, I'm still in
Yeah.
therapy every week for it. There's no, and again, it was almost 15 years ago, and I'm still daily. Like, I mean, through this experience for months, there's been a tremendous amount of healing on my end, which just goes to show how important accountability is for the victims.
Right.
Um, but no, I mean, this doesn't. The invisibility of harm almost it makes it even worse because if those kids didn't have those horrifying physical marks on their bodies, would this ever have been intervened?
Yeah, I mean, like I think about that. Whether if Russell never escaped, what would have happened? Look, I know we have to let you go, but I did want to ask you real quickly about something that really
Yeah.
struck me and how this all went down. Is that Ruby Frankie pled guilty? She was going to testify against Jodi Hildebrandt, but her lawyers, right before the plea agreement, or before the plea hearing, they released this statement. And I read it in part, and it says, again, initially, Miss Frankie believed that Jodi Hildebrandt had the insight to offer a path to continual improvement. Miss Hildebrandt took advantage of this quest and twisted it into something heinous. Over an extended period, Miss Hildebrandt systematically isolated Ruby Frankie from her extended family, older children, and her husband, Kevin Frankie. This prolonged isolation resulted in Miss Frankie being subjected to a distorted sense of morality shaped by Miss Hildebrandt's influence. What is your reaction?
So she is a victim as well. Jodi Hildebrandt has another victim, in addition to just the kids, but a lot of mothers that she probably pushed to abuse their kids, including Ruby Frankie, which again to me indicates a worse sentence for Jodi Hildebrandt and maybe a mitigating factor for Ruby Frankie. So I do not expect them to get similar sentences. Well, maybe similar. I don't expect them to get the same sentences. I expect Jodi Hildebrandt's to be more severe than Ruby Frankie's. I think potentially much more severe, but we'll see how it all plays out. What do you guys think?
To Ruby Frankie
Yeah,
throwing
yeah,
Jodi
no,
Hildebrandt under the bus and was going to testify against her.
yeah, no. It's hearing that Ruby was going to testify against Jodi just shows me that they had a lot more on Jodi. Like, the fact that Jodi got off on only 4 counts of child abuse, which is significant, and in my opinion, nothing compared to what they probably had on her. Um, and as I want to say that Ruby is an adult. Ruby is the mother, she is responsible for her children and she is responsible for what happens to her children. Full stop. And I fully agree. Like, I can completely understand where he is coming from in that statement. I don't agree with her not having responsibility. She deserves every one of those counts of child abuse. Um, but Jodi is one of the most manipulative, and it is systematic. And I know that the last time that I was on here, I talked about that, how it was with me. It's like line upon line, precept upon precept conditioning. It's like you're this frog being boiled alive in water so slowly that you don't realize it's happening until it's already happened.
Jesse, before I let you go, one last quick question. You mentioned
Yeah.
what the prosecutor said could be a potential sentence for Jodi Hildebrandt, maximum. Did the prosecutor give you any indication about what the potential sentence for Ruby Frankie would be?
I didn't ask, honestly.
Right.
Um,
And I think that's appropriate and a good answer. And I appreciate that out of her. She's not here just to like burn the world down. She's really here because of what she went through with Jodi Hildebrandt. And she's not trying to punish Ruby Frankie by proxy. So I appreciated this answer. I appreciated that she really didn't pry into it and that she's not just doing this to then go on shows and get famous by reporting back of all the inside information that she has on Ruby Frankie because of her YouTube channel, 8Passenger. So I appreciated that from Jesse. I just wanted to say that.
just that's not the connection I have
Sure.
to this case.
I got you. Jesse Hildebrandt, again, thank you so much for coming on.
So that's it. And that's kind of her statement. And the wild bombshell news is that Jodi Hildebrandt is likely to get 60 years. That would be surprising to me. It would. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't think it's unwarranted. I would just be surprised. But we'll see. And I hope we get some details of that pre-sentence investigation to see why it got the maximum sentence for 4 different crimes on top of each other to go consecutively and not concurrently, which they have already agreed to, and they know prison time is coming. So let me know what you guys think. Hit that like button. Hopefully everybody's having a great weekend. And I will see you all next week. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.